I'm going to throw on a geometry node, mushrooms, geometry, sorry, file, and it was, both of these are mushrooms right here. I believe this is a texture. Yeah, so this is just texture right here, and then these guys have actual geometry. So if there's no geometry in there, then it's just a texture. Now we can go over those as well. So here I bring this in. So now we're going to come in here and we'll look, and you see that they're actually all piled up on top of each other, right? And so each one of those should have they're all in these different groups, right, which come in as these different attributes, so they're not true groups, and you can use class, so it has class in there as well, so scene view. And so we can do this exploded view, and we're going to base that off of class. And now when we do this, they'll move apart from each other. Okay, you could also, do something where, I'll show you something cool, right? So if we wanted to like lay these out along like the x-axis, we could put down an attribute wrangle, and we're gonna change this to primitive because our class attribute is a primitive attribute. That's what this is. Primitives are faces. This is vertex attributes. These are point attributes, and you can see that on this there's all kinds of information on there. It's interesting the normals are on the points instead of the verts, which we can fix that later. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to say at p dot x plus equals at class. Oh, sorry, p is a point attribute, so we need to do this. Attribute promote. And I'm going to promote this primitive attribute to a point attribute, not by name. It's going to be class, and I'm not going to call this offset. Better. So now plus or minus offset points, and let's see. Let's make sure that these guys have my offset. All right, so I just need to add, bump these guys up just a little bit. All right, so just to make that offset visible. So there, now we can see they're all offset. We've got these cool different versions, and we can use that class attribute when we go to lay these out to be able to have random scatter. And we would use these, we would scatter these little details, right? So like the bigger stuff, we'll lay in those first. But anyway, this is still just going back through to, throw down material network. RS builder, we'll call this mushroom, and again naming, we ought to be consistent. RS material, south surface, RS texture. Let's see what we have here. We have albedo, we have displacement, and we have normal, and we have roughness. So again, it's fairly standard. So, we could even come here, right, and do this where we come out of our mushrooms, and let's just go ahead and grab out of this mossy one, we'll grab this, copy, go back into our mushrooms, delete this, paste that in, call this mushroom, and go up. Make sure we grab the right one. I'm pretty sure we did this first one. So albedo is that. And then for ease, so I don't have to navigate, I just do this. And throw this on there. Paste. And this needs to be roughness. Paste. Normals. Paste. Displacement. Always grab the EXR. Alright, so there we go. So that's all laid in, and we haven't done any like shader balancing or anything like that. Like for right now, it's just using those texture maps to get this. And according to them, that's all you should really have to do. So now on our mushroom, we'll come back up here. Let's go to our camera, and lock camera will allow us to modify our render camera, right? So if you tumble, right, without the lock on, we just go into this like universal perspective camera. We're not actually in our cam 1 anymore. We come back to it. So using that lock is helpful to be able to set your camera view and tumble and have it affect properly. All right, so here's our mushrooms. They've got all their shaders on. This guy is not set to anything. Matte net mushroom. Oops. There we go. They got shaders. Come back out here. I'm going to come back up to my redshift object, and under tessellation displacement, I'm going to enable displacement. And I think we set this pretty high. I think this was like, oh no, that's one. Okay, so let's go to our render view, hit render. I can't remember if I specify. No, so it's just candidate objects. So this is going to just load in and render whatever has the blue flag on. So candidate objects are anything that has the blue flag on. I don't like to work this way because I turn things on and off all the time to look at things and get an idea of what stuff is doing that I don't intend to have rendering. Force object, mushrooms, accept pattern. I also don't like doing this. I use force lights. That way I always know exactly what's being used. That's kind of a personal preference thing. So there you go. So it looks like I was in the wrong directory for those texture maps. That's why they're not lining up. In which case, let's go back out. Whatever one I picked from, I should be able to see. So QDZRT. And then what did I use? Nope, I didn't. I used the PDVCB. Okay, so I need to go up one. It's this one. Albedo. Rough. Oops. All right, so there you go. So here's our mushrooms. Went in and made some quick adjustments to the displacement just to get it down to where it was. So long as it has the right maps on, it looks good. So, and this stuff looks fairly believable, right? So, I know this didn't have like a, there was no map for subsurface scattering, but we could, in theory, go in and, turn on the subsurface scattering of this, right? And start playing with, what the radius of this is, for being able to see your AOVs is probably something that's really smart to put on. We should have a diffuse lighting. Let's see, what do we have? So we have all kinds of things here. So your diffuse lighting, you should have specular lighting, subsurface scatter, reflections, refractions, global illumination, emission. Those are kind of should have, it'll help you in being able to figure out, you know, all the different possibilities to troubleshoot your stuff, right? So we should come in here and say specular lighting, subsurface scattering, reflections, refractions, emission, global illumination, and you probably should have caustics and things like that once we get into that point. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I'm going to hit render again, and you see how quickly that renders. And now we can take a look at, oh, why? There is no diffuse because it's energy conserving. It's all in subsurface, right? So now looking at just the subsurface, it's kind of nice because I could go back to my mushroom and start balancing that shader based on those the subsurface, right? I can take a look at how much it's scattering, right? So if we made this 0.5 and let that render, we would now have diffuse, right? So part of that's diffuse, part of that's subsurface scattering, and then we can start figuring out, you know, something that you know, I'm not totally familiar with these shaders yet, but now we should be able to see, yeah, so see how that's got like a hard line, and then our subsurface is kind of a little softer looking. So again, it would be a matter of coming through and playing with these and kind of starting to figure out some of this stuff. Yeah, I haven't played with these shaders a lot, so Jake will be a great resource to help us out with some of the shading on this stuff. So cool. Ideally, what we would do is identify all the pieces that you want to start bringing in to the environment. Like, just start, and I would start with the big stuff first. You can see that my screen recording doesn't like when I'm using the graphics card. So go through and bring in all those things and get them set up this way, and then you can start. I'll do another thing talking about how to lay this stuff out. So.